Get him out now. He's endangering this entire operation. Captain Daniel Whitmore's command cracked through the shattered emergency entrance just as another deep tremor rolled beneath Charlotte Memorial Hospital, rattling ceiling panels and sending a cloud of pale dust drifting through the flashing red lights. Two firefighters grabbed Marcus Reed by the arms before he could point toward the fractured support column again. "Captain, listen to me," Marcus shouted, his voice rising above the wail of ambulance sirens and the constant chorus of medical alarms echoing from inside the damaged building. "The gas pressure is climbing. The foundation is failing. We have minutes, maybe less." Whitmore's weathered face hardened with disbelief. "You're seeing ghosts because you're scared." He barked loudly enough for paramedics, nurses, police officers, and frightened families gathered outside to hear every word. "I've spent 27 years walking into collapsing buildings. You've been on this department 5. Don't lecture me about structural failures." A few exhausted responders exchanged uneasy glances while others looked away, unwilling to challenge the battalion chief in the middle of a disaster scene. Marcus struggled just enough to free one arm and pointed toward the hospital's east wing. "Listen!" he yelled. "That isn't concrete settling. Hear the whistle? That's leaking medical gas. The earthquake ruptured the supply lines beneath the ICU. Every aftershock is making it worse." Whitmore let out a sharp laugh that carried more frustration than humor. "Enough. We're evacuating one floor at a time, exactly the way command ordered." Marcus shook his head, sweat streaking through the gray dust coating his face. "There isn't enough time." "There's plenty of time," Whitmore snapped. "What we don't have time for is panic." Another vibration rolled through the pavement beneath their boots. Parked ambulances bounced almost imperceptibly. Somewhere inside the hospital, a metal beam groaned with a long, haunting sound that seemed to hang in the cool afternoon air. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. The sound matched one he had studied during advanced rescue certification only months earlier. He remembered the instructor's warning with painful clarity. When steel begins to sing after a structural shift, the building is speaking before it falls. His eyes opened immediately. "Captain." His voice became calm instead of desperate. "Please, order a full evacuation now." Whitmore stepped closer until they stood only inches apart. "You don't get to make those calls," Marcus answered quietly. "No, sir, but I know what I'm hearing." Several emergency room nurses standing near the ambulance bay watched in complete silence. "Doctor." Emily Carter looked from Marcus to the cracked brick facade towering above them. She wanted to ask another question, but Whitmore had already turned toward the command vehicle. "Escort Firefighter Reed beyond the perimeter," he ordered without looking back. "He's relieved from interior operations." The words landed harder than any aftershock. Marcus felt dozens of eyes settle on him. Some looked disappointed. Others looked embarrassed for him. One young firefighter lowered his helmet, avoiding Marcus's gaze entirely. Noah Ramirez whispered under his breath, "Marcus," but stopped before finishing the sentence. The order had already been given. As Marcus was led toward the caution tape, he glanced back one final time. Through shattered windows nearly 4 stories above the entrance, he could see silhouettes moving behind broken glass. Patients, nurses, hospital staff still waiting for help. Then another low vibration rippled beneath the parking lot. A loose ambulance mirror trembled. A flock of startled pigeons exploded into the gray afternoon sky all at once. Marcus stopped walking. He stared at the side service road disappearing behind the hospital toward an older maintenance entrance, almost hidden beneath cracked oak trees. No security officers stood there. No command vehicles blocked the narrow access road. Whitmore believed the danger was inside Marcus's imagination. Marcus knew the danger was already counting down. Marcus Reed did not move toward the parking lot. He stood perfectly still behind the yellow safety tape, his breathing slow despite the growing chaos around him. Every instinct told him to run back inside, but years of training had also taught him that rushing without a plan only created more victims. He forced himself to think. 5 years earlier, when he joined the Charlotte Fire Department, the instructors at Station 12 noticed something unusual about him. Marcus was never the fastest firefighter during physical drills, nor the loudest voice during emergency simulations. Instead, he watched. He listened. He noticed details other people overlooked. During structural collapse training, while recruits focused on broken walls and fallen beams, Marcus listened for changes in vibration, shifting steel, escaping pressure, and tiny sounds hidden beneath the noise. His father had taught him that habit long before the academy ever did. Samuel Reed had served as a firefighter for nearly 3 decades in Durham, before losing his life during an apartment rescue when Marcus was only 15 years old. His father used to kneel beside old abandoned buildings and ask him a simple question: "What do you hear?" Young Marcus would usually answer with whatever seemed obvious: wind, birds, traffic. His father would smile patiently before shaking his head. "Buildings talk," he always said. "Most people only notice after they scream." Those words had never left him. They followed him through every training exercise, every apartment fire, every highway accident, and every overnight shift where exhaustion tempted firefighters to trust routine instead of observation. That same habit had brought Marcus into the hospital basement less than 30 minutes earlier. While another crew searched damaged electrical panels after the earthquake, Marcus had noticed a faint odor drifting through the mechanical corridor. It was not strong enough for everyone to recognize, but combined with an unusually high reading on his portable gas detector and a sharp metallic whistle coming from beneath cracked concrete, the warning became impossible for him to ignore. Then he saw something else. Hairline fractures stretching across one support column did not stop where earthquake damage normally ended. They continued upward toward the ceiling joints in an uneven pattern. During advanced rescue certification, instructors had explained that progressive structural failure often announced itself through subtle changes before catastrophic collapse. Marcus remembered every photograph from those classes. The cracks inside this hospital looked painfully familiar. He reported everything immediately. He expected questions. He expected another inspection team. He never expected public humiliation. Captain Whitmore had dismissed every concern within seconds, convinced that the younger firefighter had allowed fear to cloud his judgment. The dismissal spread quickly through the command post. A police lieutenant shrugged. A hospital administrator focused on evacuation paperwork instead of the warning. Several responders quietly assumed Whitmore must be right, because experience carried authority. Marcus understood why. Whitmore had earned respect over 27 years of service. He had rescued families from flooded neighborhoods, survived warehouse fires, and led countless emergency operations. Challenging him in front of dozens of responders sounded almost unthinkable, but concrete did not care about rank. Gas pressure did not respect seniority. Physics ignored pride. Marcus looked toward the east wing once again. Through fractured windows, he could still see movement behind hospital curtains. Intensive care patients could not simply stand up and leave. Elderly residents from the rehabilitation floor needed wheelchairs. Infants in the neonatal unit depended on specialized equipment. Every minute lost outside meant more lives trapped inside if the building failed. Nearby, Dr. Emily Carter finally walked toward him, lowering her voice so others could not hear. "Marcus," she said carefully, "are you absolutely certain?" He met her eyes without hesitation. "I wish I was wrong." She glanced back at the towering hospital, then toward Captain Whitmore directing crews near the ambulance entrance. "If you are right," she whispered, unable to finish the sentence. Marcus answered for her. "Then we do not have much time left." Another distant groan echoed through the structure, longer this time, followed by a shower of dust drifting from an upper corner of the building. Several people instinctively looked upward before returning to their assignments. Marcus did not wait for another order. His eyes settled once more on the forgotten maintenance road disappearing behind the damaged loading dock, and a decision quietly formed that no command could stop. Marcus slipped behind a row of damaged supply trucks before anyone noticed he had stepped away from the safety perimeter. The noise outside worked in his favor. Ambulance engines idled. Portable generators hummed. Helicopters circled somewhere above the gray afternoon clouds. Every sound blended into one endless wave of urgency, hiding the quiet footsteps of one firefighter walking in the opposite direction from everyone else. He followed the narrow maintenance road that curved around the back of the hospital, passing cracked brick walls covered with emergency utility signs and scattered tree branches left behind by the earthquake. The farther he walked, the quieter the world became. There were no reporters, no command officers, no voices arguing over evacuation zones. Only the occasional rumble beneath the pavement reminded him that the ground itself had not finished moving. As Marcus reached the old loading dock, he stopped beside a dented steel service door hanging slightly crooked on its hinges. He placed one gloved hand against the metal. It vibrated almost imperceptibly beneath his fingertips. Not from people running through the hallway, from somewhere much deeper. He slowly closed his eyes. The faint whistle he had heard earlier had become sharper now, rising and falling like someone blowing across the neck of a glass bottle. The pressure inside the damaged gas system was changing. Marcus looked toward the emergency stairwell map bolted beside the entrance. The faded diagram showed a maintenance staircase leading directly toward the intensive care wing, without passing through the main lobby where Captain Whitmore had concentrated most of the evacuation crews. It was not the fastest route, but it was the only path still likely to remain open. He pulled the door carefully. It resisted for a moment before swinging inward with a long metallic creak. Inside, dust floated through dim emergency lighting that painted the concrete walls in soft shades of red and amber. The air carried the unmistakable scent of damaged building materials mixed with disinfectant and something far more concerning. Marcus reached for the portable gas detector clipped to his turnout coat. The screen flashed another warning. The numbers climbed higher than before. His jaw tightened. "Too fast," he whispered to himself. He keyed his radio instinctively before stopping. Captain Whitmore had already removed him from interior operations. Even if he reported the new readings, there was little chance anyone would believe him before precious minutes disappeared. He clipped the radio back onto his shoulder and continued upward. On the second landing, he heard hurried footsteps descending. A young respiratory therapist nearly collided with him while carrying 2 oxygen bags. She froze in surprise. "Firefighter?" she said breathlessly. "I thought everyone was evacuating through the front." Marcus answered without slowing. "How many patients are still upstairs?" She hesitated before replying. "Too many. Intensive care still has patients waiting for transport. Neonatal has several newborns. Elevators are shut down. We cannot move everyone fast enough." Marcus nodded once. "Keep heading outside. Do not stop until you are well away from the building." She searched his face with growing concern. "What about you?" Marcus offered a calm smile that barely reached his tired eyes. "I still have work to do." She wanted to argue, but another distant groan echoed through the concrete stairwell. Dust drifted from the ceiling vents like pale snow. Without another word, she hurried downward while Marcus climbed higher. As he reached the 4th floor, emergency lights flickered twice before stabilizing again. Hallway monitors beeped steadily behind closed doors. Somewhere farther ahead, a frightened child began crying before being gently comforted by a nurse. The ordinary sounds of a hospital struggling through disaster somehow felt more heartbreaking than the chaos outside. Marcus stepped into the corridor and immediately spotted Sarah Collins, pushing an elderly woman in a wheelchair toward the stairwell. Sarah stopped in disbelief. "Marcus?" she asked. "They said you were removed from the operation." He glanced toward the rows of patient rooms stretching deeper into the intensive care unit. "They did." Sarah stared at him for a long second before quietly asking the question that neither of them truly wanted answered. "Did you come back because you still think the building is going to fall?" Marcus looked past her toward the cracked ceiling where another thin line slowly spread across the plaster, like lightning across a dark sky. Then he answered with complete honesty. "No, I came back because I know it will." Sarah Collins did not waste another second questioning him. She took a slow breath, tightened her grip on the wheelchair, and nodded once. "Tell me what you need." Marcus looked down the long intensive care hallway, where frightened families stood beside patient rooms, waiting for instructions that were arriving far too slowly. "We move everyone who can travel down the maintenance stairwell. No elevators, no delays. Tell every nurse to leave non-essential equipment behind. Lives first. Everything else stays." Sarah immediately turned toward the nearest nurse's station. "Everyone, listen to me," she called with surprising authority. "We are changing our evacuation route. Grab your patients and meet me at the west stairwell." A young nurse looked confused. "Did command approve this?" Sarah hesitated for only a heartbeat before answering honestly. "Command has not seen what we have seen." Marcus stepped into the first room where an elderly woman rested beneath several blankets. Linda Brooks smiled weakly as he entered. "Young man, she asked softly. Is everything going to be all right? Marcus knelt beside her bed so they were at eye level. We are going to get you outside together, Miss Brooks. I need you to trust me. She studied his calm expression and slowly reached for his hand. I already do. He carefully unlocked the hospital bed, disconnected everything that could safely remain behind under the guidance of a nearby nurse, and began rolling her toward the hallway. Around him, the floor transformed from uncertainty into quiet determination. Nurses pushed wheelchairs. Respiratory therapists carried portable oxygen tanks. Doctors comforted anxious patients while checking names against handwritten lists. Nobody shouted. Nobody ran. Marcus knew panic would only slow them down. Every movement needed purpose. As they approached the stairwell, another tremor rolled beneath the building. Ceiling lights flickered. A framed photograph slid from the wall and landed harmlessly on the floor with a sharp crack of glass. Several patients gasped. Marcus immediately raised his voice, steady and confident. Keep moving. Stay together. One step at a time. The reassurance spread through the group like fresh air. They continued downward. After helping the first patients reach the second floor landing, Marcus turned back toward the intensive care unit without hesitation. Sarah caught his arm. Marcus, you have already helped them. Come with us. He gently pulled free. There is still more upstairs. You cannot do this alone. Then help the ones you have. I will bring the rest. Before she could answer, he was already climbing the stairs again, 2 at a time. Sweat rolled beneath his helmet as he reached the intensive care hallway once more. This time he heard another sound beyond the warning alarms. A child was calling for someone. Marcus followed the voice into a waiting area, where a frightened 12-year-old boy stood clutching a small backpack almost as large as his shoulders. Tears filled his eyes when he saw the firefighter. Please, the boy whispered. My grandma is gone. They took her away, but my mom went back to find my medicine, and she has not come back. Marcus knelt beside him. What is your name? Ethan Brooks. Marcus recognized the last name immediately. Your grandmother is already on her way outside. Relief flashed across the boy's face before worry returned. My mom is still here. Marcus looked toward the pharmacy corridor where emergency lights glowed faintly through drifting dust. Every minute mattered now, yet leaving someone behind was never an option he could accept. He rested one reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. Stay with Nurse Kelly. Do exactly what she tells you. Ethan nodded. Will you find her? Marcus answered without hesitation. I will try. As he stepped into the corridor leading toward the pharmacy, his portable gas detector emitted a louder warning than ever before. The numbers climbed again. At almost the same moment, somewhere outside the hospital, Captain Whitmore noticed several patients emerging from a stairwell that no evacuation team had been assigned to use, and he immediately realized someone inside had ignored his direct order. Marcus moved deeper into the pharmacy corridor, following the faint sound of cabinet doors opening and closing somewhere ahead. Emergency lights cast long shadows across the polished floor, while tiny particles of dust drifted through the air with every distant vibration. His gas detector pulsed again, the warning tone becoming more urgent with each passing second. He rounded the corner and finally saw a woman kneeling beside an overturned medication cart, carefully gathering several insulated containers into a small emergency bag. She looked up in surprise as Marcus approached. Are you Melissa Brooks? He asked. She nodded quickly. Yes, my son is waiting upstairs. I only came back because my mother cannot miss her heart medication. Marcus stepped closer and gently took the bag from her hands. Your mother is already being evacuated. Ethan is safe with one of the nurses. Right now, your family needs you outside more than they need this bag. Melissa's shoulders relaxed with visible relief, but fear immediately replaced it. Is it really that serious? Marcus looked toward the ceiling where another fine crack slowly stretched across the painted surface. Yes, he answered quietly. We have to leave now. They hurried back toward the intensive care hallway together. Along the way, they passed 2 orderlies struggling to push a heavy hospital bed over uneven flooring, where the earthquake had slightly shifted the tiles beneath the wheels. Marcus immediately stepped beside them. Turn it sideways, he instructed calmly. The front wheels are catching on the raised edge. They followed his advice, and within seconds the bed rolled free. One of the orderlies looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you. We thought we were stuck." Marcus simply nodded. "Keep moving toward the west stairwell. Do not stop." When they reached the intensive care unit again, Sarah Collins was helping the last remaining patients prepare for evacuation. Her expression changed the moment she saw Melissa. "Thank goodness," she whispered before embracing her briefly. Marcus looked down the hallway. Only 3 occupied rooms remained. "Who is left?" Sarah checked her handwritten notes. "One patient recovering from surgery who cannot walk without assistance. One elderly veteran on oxygen support, and one newborn whose transport incubator is too large for the stairwell." Marcus glanced toward the neonatal room. "We carry the baby." Sarah hesitated. "Without the transport unit, wrap the infant securely. Use the portable monitor and oxygen. We cannot wait." The nurses immediately began preparing the newborn while Marcus entered the room of the elderly veteran. The man smiled faintly beneath silver hair and tired eyes. "I was wondering when somebody would come," he said with remarkable calm. Marcus adjusted the portable oxygen tank beside the wheelchair. "Sorry to keep you waiting, sir." The veteran chuckled softly. "I spent 20 years in the Army. Waiting became one of my strongest skills." Together they moved into the hallway where the evacuation slowly continued toward the stairwell. Outside, Captain Daniel Whitmore watched another group of patients emerge from the maintenance exit. Confusion spread across his face as he counted far more survivors than his official evacuation teams had reported. He turned sharply toward Noah Ramirez. "Who authorized that route?" Noah looked genuinely puzzled. "Nobody, Captain. We never sent a crew through the west stairwell." Whitmore stared at the maintenance entrance for several silent seconds before understanding settled heavily across his expression. There was only one firefighter who knew about that route and believed the front evacuation was too slow. He reached for his radio. "Marcus Reed, respond immediately." Static answered him. He tried again. "Firefighter Reed, this is Captain Whitmore. Respond." Nothing. Dr. Emily Carter stepped beside him, watching another wheelchair roll safely into the parking lot. "Those patients would still be upstairs if someone had not ignored your order," she said quietly. Whitmore did not answer. His eyes remained fixed on the dark maintenance doorway as another low groan echoed from somewhere deep inside the hospital, louder than before. While far below the building, Marcus lifted the newborn carefully into his arms and realized that this tiny child would have to be the last person he carried out before time finally ran out. Marcus cradled the newborn against his turnout coat, while Sarah Collins carefully secured the portable oxygen line and wrapped another warm blanket around the tiny child. The baby slept peacefully, unaware that every adult in the hallway had begun measuring time differently. Seconds now mattered more than minutes. Marcus glanced once more toward the remaining patient room where the elderly veteran waited beside his wheelchair. "Sarah," he said calmly, "take the baby down first. Noah should be waiting near the second-floor landing by now. Do not stop until you reach the parking lot." Sarah looked uncertain. "What about you?" Marcus smiled with quiet confidence. "I promised one more person we would leave together." She nodded, accepting that arguing would only waste precious time. Holding the newborn close, she disappeared into the stairwell with 2 neonatal nurses following behind. The hallway suddenly felt almost silent. Emergency alarms continued flashing overhead, but between their steady rhythm, Marcus noticed something else. The metallic whistle beneath the floor had changed again. It was higher now, sharper, almost like a tea kettle left too long on a stove. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. The sound confirmed what he had feared from the beginning. The pressure inside the damaged system was still increasing. He opened his eyes and walked into the veteran's room. The elderly man adjusted his oxygen tubing and smiled with remarkable composure. "Looks like I am the last one," he said. Marcus returned the smile while unlocking the wheelchair brakes. "That only means you get a private escort." The veteran chuckled softly. "I have waited 80 years for first-class service." Together they rolled into the hallway at a steady pace. Marcus refused to rush. Fear often spread faster than danger itself, and the veteran deserved calm instead of panic. As they reached the stairwell door, another vibration traveled through the concrete walls. Dust drifted gently from the ceiling, sparkling beneath the red emergency lights before settling onto the handrails. The veteran looked upward for a second. Sounds unhappy. Marcus kept one hand firmly on the wheelchair. Then we should not keep the building waiting. They began descending one flight at a time. The veteran paused briefly on each landing to catch his breath, apologizing every few steps. Marcus shook his head every time. You are doing exactly what I need you to do. On the second floor, they met Noah Ramirez climbing upward carrying an empty evacuation chair. Relief spread across Noah's face the moment he saw Marcus. I knew you would still be inside, he said. Marcus gestured toward the veteran. Help me take him the rest of the way. Noah immediately moved behind the wheelchair. Together they guided it safely over each stair while the veteran quietly thanked them after every landing. When they finally reached the maintenance exit, cool afternoon air rushed across their faces. Families, waiting outside, broke into relieved applause as another survivor emerged. Melissa Brooks embraced her son Ethan with tears of gratitude while Linda Brooks reached toward Marcus from her wheelchair. I told you I trusted you, she said warmly. Marcus simply tipped his helmet with a humble smile before looking back toward the hospital. Something felt wrong. The parking lot had grown strangely quiet. Even the helicopter overhead seemed distant. Captain Daniel Whitmore stood near the command vehicle, staring at Marcus without speaking. The anger that had filled his face earlier had disappeared, replaced by uncertainty. Dr. Emily Carter approached carrying a clipboard filled with patient names. She looked down the list, then back at Marcus. Every intensive care patient is accounted for, she said softly. Every neonatal patient is safe. We thought we were losing people today. Marcus exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours, but his eyes never left the building. The whistle had stopped. That frightened him more than any alarm. He slowly unclipped the gas detector from his coat. The screen froze for a brief second before displaying one final warning, as the numbers surged higher than at any point before suddenly dropping to zero. Marcus's expression changed instantly. He looked toward Captain Whitmore and spoke with complete urgency but without panic. Everyone needs to move farther back. Right now, this building has reached its limit. Captain Daniel Whitmore did not argue this time. Something in Marcus Reed's voice had changed. It no longer sounded like a firefighter trying to win an argument. It sounded like a man who had already accepted a terrible truth. Whitmore turned toward the nearest rescue crews and raised both arms. Move everyone back. Double the safety perimeter. Now! His command echoed across the crowded parking lot. And for the first time that afternoon, nobody questioned Marcus's warning. Firefighters guided patients, families, and hospital staff farther across the street, while police officers redirected traffic away from the entrance. Wheelchairs rolled quickly across the uneven pavement. Nurses carried newborns wrapped tightly in blankets. Doctors helped elderly patients find seats inside waiting ambulances. Marcus remained near the edge of the evacuation zone, his eyes fixed on the hospital. Every window reflected the gray North Carolina sky. The building looked strangely peaceful, almost untouched, as though nothing dangerous could possibly be hiding inside. Then a deep sound rose from somewhere beneath the foundation. It was not loud at first. It resembled the slow creaking of an old ship settling against a dock. The ground vibrated beneath everyone's feet. A row of parked ambulances rocked gently. Several people instinctively turned around. No one spoke. Another long groan followed, this time stretching through the entire length of the structure. Fine cracks spread across sections of the exterior brick like thin branches, reaching across frozen glass. Dr. Emily Carter covered her mouth with both hands. Noah Ramirez stared silently beside Marcus. Captain Whitmore could only watch as years of confidence disappeared from his face, one quiet second at a time. The east wing shifted almost imperceptibly before the movement spread through the connected sections of the hospital. Windows shattered under the pressure of the failing structure. Large clouds of dust rolled upward as parts of the damaged building folded inward. Within moments, the hospital that had stood over Charlotte for decades had become a mountain of broken concrete, twisted steel, and drifting gray dust. The collapse ended as suddenly as it had begun. An overwhelming silence settled across the parking lot. Even the emergency sirens seemed distant beneath the weight of what everyone had just witnessed. Nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. Parents held their children closer. Nurses counted patients once again with trembling hands. Several firefighters removed their helmets without saying a word. Captain Whitmore slowly turned toward Marcus. His lips moved, but no words came out. He replayed the afternoon inside his mind. Marcus had reported the leaking gas. Marcus had identified the spreading structural cracks. Marcus had predicted the progressive failure. Marcus had begged for a full evacuation. Then Whitmore remembered something that tightened his chest even more. He had publicly accused Marcus of panicking before ordering him away from the operation. Emily Carter suddenly looked down at the tablet still hanging from her shoulder. "The security system," she whispered. "Some of the internal cameras upload automatically to the emergency server." A communications officer standing nearby quickly opened the latest recordings. Several firefighters gathered around the screen in complete silence. The video showed Marcus inside the basement nearly half an hour earlier, calmly pointing toward the damaged support column while explaining the increasing gas readings and the unusual structural fractures. There was no panic in his voice, no confusion, only clear observations supported by the detector in his hand. Another recording captured the moment he repeated the warning outside the emergency entrance. The timestamp confirmed that he had identified the danger long before the collapse. Nobody watching the footage could deny what had happened. Noah lowered his head. Emily quietly wiped away tears of relief and gratitude. Captain Whitmore remained frozen before finally walking toward Marcus, one slow step at a time. The older officer stopped only a few feet away. Around them, firefighters, doctors, nurses, police officers, and rescued families watched without speaking. Whitmore looked at the enormous cloud of dust rising above the fallen hospital, then back at the young firefighter he had tried to remove from the scene. His voice was barely above a whisper when he finally managed to say, "You saved every person I believed we still had time to reach, and I almost stopped you from doing it." Captain Daniel Whitmore lowered his head, as though the weight of the collapsed hospital rested on his shoulders alone. Around him, the rescue scene continued with quiet purpose. Paramedics checked patients one final time. Police officers guided families toward temporary shelters. Volunteers handed out blankets and bottled water as the late afternoon sun slowly pushed through the lingering gray dust. Marcus Reed looked across the parking lot, not toward the cameras that had begun arriving, but toward the long line of survivors sitting safely beyond the expanded perimeter. Linda Brooks smiled warmly from her wheelchair, while Ethan leaned against his mother, finally able to breathe without fear. The newborn Sarah Collins had carried down the maintenance stairwell, rested peacefully in a nurse's arms. Marcus counted them one more time in silence. Every face represented another reason he had ignored the order to leave. Captain Whitmore stepped forward until he stood directly in front of Marcus. The surrounding firefighters instinctively became quiet. Noah Ramirez removed his helmet. Dr. Emily Carter folded her arms across her chest, waiting to hear what the veteran commander would say. Whitmore reached up slowly, removed his own helmet, and held it against his side. "Firefighter Reed," he began, his voice steady but filled with regret. "I owe you an apology in front of every person who heard me question your judgment." Marcus remained silent, giving the older man the dignity of finishing without interruption. Whitmore continued, "I believe my experience gave me every answer. I dismissed your observations before I even examined the evidence. I embarrassed you in front of this department, and I nearly allowed my pride to place innocent lives in greater danger." The parking lot remained completely still. Nobody looked away. Several younger firefighters exchanged thoughtful glances as they listened to a commander admit mistakes that few leaders ever acknowledged publicly. Whitmore looked toward the survivors sitting beneath emergency tents. "Those families are together because you refused to stop caring after I ordered you out." Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm and respectful. "Captain, today was never about proving who was right." Whitmore lifted his eyes. Marcus continued, "Every firefighter wears this uniform for the same reason. We go where people need us. Sometimes experience sees what youth cannot. Sometimes fresh eyes notice what experience overlooks. We need both if we want everyone to make it home." The words settled over the gathering with quiet force. Emily Carter smiled through tired eyes. Noah gave a small nod of agreement. Sarah Collins gently rocked the sleeping newborn while listening from only a few yards away. Captain Whitmore took a slow breath before extending his hand. "Can you forgive an old firefighter who forgot that learning never ends?" Marcus looked at the outstretched hand for only a moment before accepting it firmly. "There is nothing to forgive," he answered. "The people who mattered are alive. That is enough for me." Whitmore's eyes reflected both relief and humility. "No," he said softly. "It is enough for them. I still have work to do." Moments later, reporters began approaching the command area, asking who had organized the successful evacuation through the maintenance stairwell. One of the city officials turned toward Marcus and invited him to stand before the cameras. Marcus politely shook his head. "The patients should be the story today," he replied. "They stayed brave. The nurses never stopped working. The doctors never left their patients. I was only one person in a very large team." Emily quietly laughed. Only Marcus would rescue an entire hospital and still try to disappear into the crowd. Several firefighters smiled for the first time since the earthquake. Captain Whitmore looked at Marcus with genuine respect that had not existed a few hours earlier. He turned toward the waiting reporters and answered before anyone else could speak. "If you want to know who led when leadership mattered most," he said clearly, "look at the firefighter standing beside me. He saw the danger before the rest of us. He acted when others doubted him. And he reminded every one of us that courage is measured by service, not by rank." 1 year later, the empty lot where Charlotte Memorial Hospital had once stood was covered with fresh green grass waiting for a new medical center to rise. A simple memorial walkway crossed the property, lined with young oak trees planted in honor of the doctors, nurses, firefighters, police officers, and volunteers who had protected their community during the earthquake. On a quiet Saturday morning, the air carried the scent of fresh rain while sunlight filtered gently through the leaves. There were no flashing emergency lights now, no warning sirens, only the distant laughter of children playing in a nearby park and the soft rustling of branches in the breeze. Marcus Reed arrived wearing a neatly pressed dress uniform instead of heavy rescue gear. He paused beside a bronze plaque engraved with the date of the disaster before resting one hand lightly against its smooth surface. He did not see the memorial as a reminder of what had fallen. He saw it as a reminder of the lives that had continued because ordinary people chose courage over fear. Behind him, familiar voices slowly filled the walkway. Sarah Collins approached carrying a smiling toddler whose tiny hand reached curiously toward Marcus's badge. "She was the newborn you carried down those stairs," Sarah said with a warm smile. "Her parents wanted you to know that her first birthday is next week." Marcus gently touched the child's hand. "She looks ready to outrun all of us." Sarah laughed. "That is exactly what her mother says every day." A few steps away, Linda Brooks walked carefully without a wheelchair, supported only by a polished wooden cane. Ethan, now a little taller than before, stood proudly beside her wearing a junior firefighter shirt from a community safety program. "I still remember what you told me," Ethan said. "You promised you would try to find my mom." Marcus smiled. "And I remember finding a very brave young man who listened to the nurses when it mattered most." Ethan grinned. "I want to become a firefighter someday." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then remember that the strongest firefighters are the ones who never stop learning from others." Before Ethan could answer, another familiar figure approached quietly. Captain Daniel Whitmore looked different than he had a year earlier. Retirement had softened the lines across his face, but humility had changed him even more. He carried a small presentation case beneath one arm. Standing before Marcus, he opened the case and revealed a Departmental Medal of Valor. "The city asked me to present this," Whitmore said. "I accepted because I needed the chance to finish something I should have started long ago." Marcus looked at the medal before gently shaking his head. "Every firefighter who stayed that day earned this." Whitmore smiled. "That is exactly why you deserve to wear it." He carefully pinned the medal onto Marcus's uniform while the gathered firefighters, nurses, doctors, and families watched in respectful silence. There was no applause at first. The moment felt too personal for celebration. Then Noah Ramirez removed his cap and began clapping slowly. Emily Carter joined him. Soon the quiet applause spread naturally through the crowd, until every survivor standing beneath the oak trees was smiling. Marcus looked around at the faces before him. He saw gratitude instead of fear, respect instead of doubt, and hope instead of division. The earthquake had changed buildings, careers, and lives, but it had also changed hearts. Captain Whitmore extended his hand one final time. Marcus accepted it without hesitation, and neither man felt the need to say anything more. Some lessons were too important for speeches. As the morning breeze moved gently through the memorial trees, Sunlight reflected from Marcus's helmet resting on a nearby bench, and the voices around him gradually faded into peaceful conversation, while two firefighters, once divided by pride and misunderstanding, stood side by side in quiet respect, allowing the silence itself to tell the story that words no longer needed to explain.